Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Korman Productions, here to talk about This Is Us, Season 5, Episode 11, One Small Step. A very Uncle Nicky-centric episode, which I knew going in, but I was not quite prepared for how Nicky-centric this episode was going to be. Chrissy Metz and Sterling K. Brown are not in this episode, as their characters take a seat. Justin Hartley himself is barely in this episode, along with Madison. I'm not usually a fan of episodes that completely sideline the big three, but this one happens to be an exception because it gave me what I've been looking for all season long, which is an Uncle Nicky story. We had to bring him back in because in the future scenes, he is at Rebecca's bedside. Also returning in this episode is Jennifer Morrison as Cassidy. I was a little worried that her turn in this episode would either be like one scene or she would show up and cause problems for Kevin and Madison. Neither ended up really being the case. Her return here is rather satisfying, and hopefully we get to see a little bit more of her going forward. Before going any further with this video, I would remind people that this is not a spoiler-free video, so if you have not yet watched the episode, I recommend that you do so before watching my video. And if you like this video and my content in general, please subscribe to my channel. This episode begins with Kevin laughing and asking Uncle Nicky, what is he doing there? He has just arrived at Kevin's doorstep. We are literal seconds after the last episode ended. He says, well, I came to see my namesake. And the girl too. And Kevin's like, oh yeah, of course, come on in. He mentions that he got the invitation for the kid's baptism. But, as it turns out, this invitation is for a digital baptism. But that's not something that Nicky really understands. This is the first time that Uncle Nicky is meeting Madison, and his comment is that she is very tiny, and that the twins probably did a number on her. That's not an awkward comment at all. You can see Kevin laughing in the background. Uncle Nicky then proceeds to take off his mask and say he knows that everybody is freaking out about the virus, but he's been vaccinated twice, and he's been constantly getting tested. He goes on to say that he didn't touch anything on the plane, and Kevin starts laughing. Kevin tells him that he can't believe that Uncle Nicky traveled all this way just to see the kids, and that's incredible. And Uncle Nicky says that's no trouble at all, only that's not quite the truth. It took him a lifetime to get here. We cut to Uncle Nicky in the past, just before he embarked on this journey. He's in his trailer, and he's looking at the invitation that Kevin and Madison sent him. He calls Cassidy and asks about Amazon, and then not suddenly, I'm sure after a couple of days for delivery, he has a bunch of Amazon packages. With the supplies from Amazon, we see him getting to work on something. It looks like a figurine, but we are not quite sure yet what Nicky is building. He gets his first vaccination shot, and then is perturbed to realize that there needs to be a second one that he has to get in 3 weeks. He boxes up whatever he was making for the kids, and then we cut to another shot of Kevin getting his second shot of the vaccine, and he tells his nurse that he's going to go to California to see his great nieces and nephews. Niece and nephew. There's one of each. And then credits. 3 minutes and 59 seconds into the episode. Another almost normal cold open for a television show. Very economical. We cut to the past timeline, where the astronauts are about to step on the moon for the first time. One small step for mankind. Peter Ornati, once again playing Jack's father rather, is watching the broadcast, while Nicky, next to him, has built a model of the lunar module. He shows his dad, who doesn't quite know what it is, and he eventually ends up saying he likes the stairs. This is an interesting episode for Stanley in that he's not a complete SOB, though he has little tiny moments that remind you of him being an SOB. And I kind of like This Is Us's take on Jack's dad, because he's not always completely terrible. He has his good moments. On the whole, he's an abusive drunk. But he's not always bad. And that seems to me very true to life. Jack comes home with some beer in his arm, something that does not go unnoticed by his dad, who basically asks, "What, are you hoarding your beers?" And Jack ends up tossing one to him. We then see Jack's mom, which initially confused me. I wasn't exactly clear on what the timeline was for when Jack basically had his mom get away from his dad. But looking back, it was basically after Jack went to Vietnam. Her mom brings out some hors d'oeuvres, which Stanley criticizes for some reason. 2 of everything or something. I don't quite catch what his issue is. But Stanley says, "Jack, have a seat next to your little sister," which draws a disgusted look from Jack. But he does as he's told. The family watches transfixed as the lunar module lands on the moon. Their mom grabs Stanley's hand, which both Nicky and Jack notice. Maybe it's one of the few rare moments of affection between the two. A little bit later, Jack finds Nicky in the kitchen and asks, "Are you thinking about moving out of Mom and Dad's house anytime soon?" And Nicky says, "No, because unlike you, I actually like having hot water." But Jack is like, "Yeah, but you don't want to be Dad's lapdog forever, do you? You gotta leave the nest at some point." And it's interesting, I don't know if I ever quite got this about Nicky's character, but Nicky is a very shy and very risk-averse guy. He gets in his comfort zone and he stays there. And he was like this even before he went to war. Nicky comments that he might be forcibly removed from the nest if he gets drafted. And Jack says, "You're not going to get drafted." But we know that he is wrong, that he is definitely going to get drafted. And Nicky says that it's not really that bad right now. That their father is a lot better with him around. And Jack says, "Do me a favor. At least get a girlfriend or something." Nicky makes a joke about, "Yeah, sure, you got Raquel Welch's number?" Raquel Welch being, what was hot back in the day. And Jack says, "Come on, there's got to be at least some girl that works with you at the vet." And Nicky gives a little smirk, almost, that gives himself away. And Jack realizes, there is someone. And Nicky tells him about Sally, whom we've actually heard about before, back in season 4. Jack repeats the name and says, "There is a man walking on the moon right now. Ask Sally out and get out of the house. If he can do it," pointing at the sky, "you can do it." Nicky doesn't look quite so convinced. We cut to present day. Well, not quite present day, but a little more present day than we were just at. Cassidy is wrapping Nicky's present for the babies. And Nicky is criticizing the wrap job, saying, "Aren't there supposed to be corners?" And Cassidy responds, "Would you like to take over?" And Nicky says that he spent weeks on what's in the package, so she could be a little bit neater. And he sucks at rapping. And he got that right. You suck at rapping, so you gave it to somebody else. So, you probably should just be quiet there, Nicky. But Cassie responds she's very curious about what the mysterious gifts are. And she responds that she was an intelligence officer, so she could totally get the information out of him if she really wanted to, using a variety of torture techniques, no doubt. She finishes wrapping the package and asks, "Is this up to your standards?" And Nicky gives her the thumbs up. Cassidy says that she's proud of him. Getting out of the trailer, getting out of his routine, those are big deals. And Nick gruffly says, under his breath almost, "Thank you." And the way he says it draws a look from Cassidy. And then he says more sincerely, "No, kid, really, thank you. There hasn't been too many people that I can rely upon since the war." We cut to a little bit back in the timeline. After the war, Nicky's in his trailer by himself. He gets a phone call. It turns out to be someone he served with. And he asks, "What the hell do you want?" And the guy, named Townie, is basically like, "Well, good to see you too. And I'm doing very well, thank you very much." He was calling because a few of the guys were getting together to celebrate a lieutenant's engagement. And the main reason he's suggesting that he go is because Jack is going to be there. Jack, who he hasn't spoken to in years. Townie makes him take down the information to where the event is taking place. After the phone call, eventually, Nicky goes to a drawer and pulls out a photograph of Jack holding a plate of food with Nicky. The context of which we don't yet understand. We cut briefly back to Nicky as an older man in his apartment. Cassidy knocks on the door and asks him if he's ready, and Nicky responds, "Ready as I ever will be." And then we cut back to the past. Nicky takes the address off the refrigerator, and it looks like he's about to attempt to go to this get-together. We cut to Nicky, more in the timeline before he goes to Vietnam, trying to get his dog at his job as a vet, or a vet tech, or I forget, I don't quite know what he is, but he works at a vet, and he's trying to get a dog to go take a bath, but she's not moving. Sally happens into the scene, and Nick explains his dilemma. And Sally simply says, "You can't get a willful woman to do anything, so there's only one thing to do." And Sally takes off her dress, which makes Nick nervous. Don't worry, she's still wearing clothes. She got this slip on, I think. I think that's what that is. It's a slip of some sort. You know what? You should really ask a fashion expert, which is not me, by the way, what that is. But I am not sure. Either way, she is still covered. She goes over to the shower and starts turning on the water, eventually drawing the dog over. After that, we have a scene with Sally and Nick talking about how water is healing, and Nicky is really just parroting her because he's nervous and he's kind of in love, and I can see why. She asks him if they watched the men land on the moon. And of course, Nicky did with his family. Nicky actually starts geeking out a little bit, and we see Jack open the door. He's there to pick up his brother, but seeing him talk to Sally, he hangs back. Sally mentions that she is going to drive to St. Washington to watch the moon, to look at it. And she asks Nicky if he ever does such a thing. Hint, hint, Nicky, you should totally come with me. But of course, Nicky painfully painfully whips it and says that his brother is waiting for him. But Jack, who's been listening at the door, is totally not going to let Nicky get away with that. He comes in and says hi to Sally and says, "Hey, Sally, I'm Jack's brother." And Sally's like, "Hi, Jack. You have a determined aura about you. Cancer?" And Jack's like, No, I'm feeling fine," which was a pretty funny joke. Subtle. Jack goes on to say, "Hey, I didn't mean to eavesdrop," and I'm actually surprised that Jack took that tack. I thought he was going to pretend like, ignorance of this conversation, but he doesn't. He just goes full in on it. "So you're going to go check out the moon, huh?" There is no better person to do that with than Nicky. Nicky looks extremely uncomfortable. Jack sounds like he's going to continue on, but he's interrupted by Sally. And he's like, "Jack, I am fully capable of asking out your brother all on my own. Nicky, how would you like to go hang out with Pearl, meet Pearl, and gaze at the moon tonight?" And Nicky says, Yeah, I'd love that," with a smile and a little laugh. Okay, so here's my question. Did Nicky completely miss the fact that she was trying to get him to go with her in the first place? Or was he aware of it and just kind of playing stupid on purpose because he was scared? I'm honestly not sure. Both seem to fit Nicky's character. If my audience would like to give me their take on that, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section of this video. Cut to Nicky and Cassidy in the car on the way to the airport. Cassidy is basically momming him, reminding him of TSA procedures, and then suggesting that he might want to give Kevin a heads up that he's coming. Or at least someone in the family, so that they know he's in the air on the off chance that the plane should, crash and burn. That's my take, not what Cassidy says. And Nicky points out that she will know that he's on that plane. He tells her to give him a break. He hasn't been on an airplane since he got medevaced out of Vietnam. In case I don't make it, I don't want to disappoint him. I don't want to do that to him. And Cassidy tells him, make sure to breathe, okay? And Nicky's only response is, okay. Cut to Nicky making his way through the airport security. Unfortunately, a TSA agent wants to unwrap the package. Apparently, this is policy. I'm not sure why Nicky felt the need to carry that package and why he didn't just have that in his luggage, but, whatever. He was probably unaware that what was going to happen was going to happen. Anyway, the TSA agent opens up the package, which turns out to be a couple of snow globes, which is what Nicky was working on. The agent takes exception to the amount of liquid in the snow globe, and Nicky starts freaking out, saying he'll simply empty some of the water, so that he doesn't have to show up empty-handed. Unfortunately, he ends up dropping the snow globes and breaking them. Cut to Nicky in the past, about to meet up with Sally and Pearl. Pearl turns out to be Sally's van. Sally invites him into the van, and as it turns out, she has lots and lots of pictures in there. Sally and Pearl have been all over together. Nicky comments that it's like he can see a little bit of her in every picture. He can see how she sees the world. And she rather cutely says that he pretty much nailed it. Later, the pair are looking at the moon, and she asks him to tell her about a moon fact, eventually asking, "Why do you love the moon?" And he says, "I like that it's Earth's personal satellite, and that we can all count on it. It's always there, but different every night. And no matter where you are in the world, we are all looking up at the same moon." They look at each other, and Nicky says, "I really want to kiss you now." They laugh, and then they kiss. And we go through a lovely montage of their relationship, their building love. Eventually landing on a family dinner with the Pearsons. She manages to have dinner with Jack's dad, Jack and Nicky's dad, and it goes well. That's got to be an achievement in and of itself, which both Jack and Nicky are discussing in the kitchen when Sally joins them with a camera, leading to the picture that we saw earlier. We cut to Nicky in the future, after the war in Vietnam, outside the little get-together. Nicky is rehearsing what he's going to say to his brother. "I'm better now. I'm not the monster you think I am." Only I'm not quite convinced that Nicky actually feels that way. I'm not convinced that Nicky doesn't think of himself as a monster, because of what happened in Vietnam with him accidentally blowing up the kid. That eventually led to Jack and Nicky's estrangement. He looks at the picture that Sally took of him and Jack. And actually, I misspoke, by the way. I said that he was near the get-together, when actually, in fact, he has not left his trailer yet. But he's about to. One small step. We briefly cut to the current day timeline with Nicky on the plane. And then back to the past with Sally and Nicky. Sally eventually proposes traveling to see Woodstock, which Nicky readily agrees to do so. But then she proposes packing up Pearl and traveling out of Pittsburgh to California, which Nicky is considerably more hesitant to do because it is significantly out of his comfort zone. It's out of the realm of playing it safe, and it means leaving his family behind. But eventually, she talks him into doing it. Sally seems exactly the kind of girl that Nicky needs. Unfortunately, things don't quite work out that great. We are outside the bar. Nicky is in the truck. He sees some of his former comrades, and eventually Jack enter the picture. Jack goes inside. We see Nicky at a distance, and eventually cut inside to see Jack with Lieutenant Seahan. Jack eventually ends up asking advice. He's not yet engaged to Rebecca, but he feels like he's lying to her. As far as she knows, he's never fired a weapon. He was just a mechanic in Vietnam. And he told her that Nicky died in Vietnam. He thinks too much time has gone by to tell her now, but also it's eating at him. Eventually, the lieutenant says to him that he should keep his former life, the one he had in Vietnam, apart from the life he's building. Some people did not like the lieutenant saying this. They took it to mean that Jack should continue lying to Rebecca. I think the truth is more complicated than that. The lieutenant is suggesting leaving the war behind, and to just simply not talk about it. Whether that's good advice or not, I really couldn't say. I haven't been there, so I don't really know what the right thing to do here would be. I have no real framework with which to judge this particular action. Now, should he continue lying about Nicky? No, I don't think he should, but he's going to. And I also don't think that the lieutenant is necessarily endorsing that. He's just endorsing not talking about the war. I think his mind kind of blew by the whole lying about Nicky thing. Or he really just doesn't know what to say about that. So I don't think he's really commenting on that so much as he's speaking in general terms. Keep the war and your current life separate. We see Nicky struggling, having anxiety with the idea of going in and seeing his brother. Eventually, he opens the truck door. We cut to Jack entering Nicky's room with a suitcase that we saw earlier. Older Nicky was packing that very suitcase. It was a Samsonite, and Jack says that it should last forever. He's not kidding about that, though he did have to tape it. He's fully endorsing Jack leaving, or rather Nicky leaving with Sally. Jack asks if he's told Mom and Dad yet, and no, he hasn't. He was going to watch the astronaut land on TV, and then he was going to wait for the parents to go to sleep and then sneak out to meet up with Sally. He didn't want to tell them in case he got cold feet. Very curiously, the same logic that older Nicky uses to not tell Kevin that he's coming in the future. Nicky eventually expresses fears that he will stick out like a sore thumb. He doesn't know how to surf. He's not really the California kind of guy. And Sally is probably just going to dump him somewhere along the way. Jack's dad often accused Jack of being in his head. Nicky really is. Nicky is his own worst enemy. Nicky is afraid of everything when it comes down to it. Cut to Nicky and Jack, or rather Nicky and his father, sitting in the living room, watching the astronauts as they have their parade back on Earth. Jack's father glances over at Nicky after glancing at the model that Nicky built. And Nicky asks, "What?" He eventually responds that he couldn't believe that he was Nicky's age when President Roosevelt got on the radio and mentioned or told the world that Pearl Harbor happened. He says, everything changed. Now, I'm the old man, sitting with my son, watching 3 Americans fly home from the moon. Life is wild. Eventually, Nicky's mom joins them. After giving Nicky something, he sits with Stanley. They grab hands, which Nicky notices once again. And something about this makes Nicky decide not to leave. Maybe he genuinely feels like he needs to stay to keep Stanley from becoming the monster that he usually is. Maybe he's scared and simply using this as an excuse. Either way, he doesn't leave with Sally. A little further in the timeline, he sees Jack leaving the bar. He's out of his truck. He gets close, but in the end, he says nothing. 2 very big missed opportunities. Sally is the one that got away. And here was an opportunity to possibly reconnect with his brother. Maybe it wouldn't have gone well. But Nicky won't know, because he didn't try. Cut to Nicky in the present day, where he's in Madison and Kevin's house, repeating the line that it was nothing. But in truth, it was everything. When we come back from commercials, Nicky is trying out sushi and very confused by it. Kevin says, "So you just went online and booked a plane ticket?" And Nicky says, "Hey, you named your son after me. I had to come." Kevin laughs, and Madison says, "I'm going to say goodnight. I'm going to feed the kids and then go to bed." Nicky says to her, "I'm sorry that I showed up unannounced. I recognize that it's kind of weird. I recognize that was the only way Nicky was going to get here." And Madison says, No, Kevin was just saying he missed having family around. So this is good. Glad to have you. It's a good weird in Madison's book. After a beat, Nicky says, "Well, a lot's happened since the last time I saw you in the flesh. And Kevin laughs. And Kevin says, "Yep, a lot has happened. And I can't wait until you meet Nick and Franny. They're perfect. You just stare into their eyes and it's like nothing is wrong in the world." And then Kevin goes on to talk about a dog park that he wants Nicky to go with him to see. And proceeds to ramble on and on about what the twins should call him. Pops, Uncle, Grandpa, none of that really fits, but Kevin just keeps going on and on about it while Nicky kind of looks at him, not really knowing what to say. Eventually, Kevin gets a serious look on his face and says, "You must be exhausted. Why don't I get you ready for bed? Or get your bed ready? Or whatever." Cut to Nicky not sleeping. He picks up the phone and calls Cassidy. And Cassidy's like, "Hey, it's almost 4 a.m. here." But he knows that Cassidy is not asleep because they both struggle to sleep. Nicky thinks he made a mistake. He thinks he should leave in the middle of the night while everybody's asleep. And Cassidy says, "Are you certifiable?" Cassidy tells him, "Nicky, you've hated yourself for so long, and now you have all this love coming at you, and you feel weird, and you want to go AWOL. And I would venture to say that Nicky doesn't feel like he deserves this love. That he feels what he deserves is to be alone and miserable. And to get otherwise makes him extremely uncomfortable." Cassidy asks him, "And then what? Go back to your trailer and stare at the pot of your cactus until you die?" Cassidy's voice cracks a little bit and says, "I didn't know this brother of yours, but I did know two pretty decent men who spent their lives wondering, would he be proud of them?" The other, of course, being Kevin. Deep down, don't you think he would be proud of you, Nicky? You made it all the way to California. I personally think that Jack would have wanted exactly this. I think he wanted to go back for his brother. That he wanted him to be a part of his family's life. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. And so Kevin succeeded where Jack failed. And maybe now Nicky will get a chance to actually live. We cut to Nicky opening the door to his nephew and niece. They're both curiously awake while at the same time being extremely quiet. And I gotta ask, why is the light on here? Is that how the kids sleep? He greets the kids quietly and with a smile and assures them that he will not get too close. He tells them that he's been vaccinated twice because I'm really sure the babies are concerned about that. Nicky, holding a pink bag, says that he made for them really special gifts, but that this country is really idiotic about its rules sometimes, and I feel you on that, Nicky. And so unfortunately, those gifts are no more. But he stopped by a newsstand and got the babies 2 books. 2 John Grisham books, The Firm and The Rainmaker, both books of which I have read, by the way, and I would certainly appreciate these gifts, though the babies are a little bit too young to properly enjoy them. He says he jotted some things down in the book of great words of wisdom, but when you're an old man and you're on a plane looking out a window, you think about all the mistakes you make in life. We cut to Nicky in the past, having just failed to reunite with Jack. He takes the picture that Sally took and places it back in a box and then locks it up. I lived alone. Every day, the same routine, Nicky says to the babies. For 50 years. But then, I got an invitation to meet you two. And you know what it got me thinking about? It got me thinking about the moon. July 20th, 1969. I watched a man walk on the moon. One day, we had never been to the moon. It was impossible to fathom even walking on it. And then the next day, we're walking on it. The impossible became possible. Just like that. For 50 years, I lived in a trailer. A trailer that went nowhere. Whatever the opposite of an astronaut, that's what I became. But then I got that invitation in the mail. For a Zoom, apparently, whatever the hell that is. But an invitation to meet my great nephew and my great niece. My big brother's grandchildren. I lived alone for a really long time. I've been stuck. Anything good, if it ever could happen to me, it seemed impossible. But here I am. I made it. You two are my moon. One small step. It doesn't always have to be landing on the moon or doing something extraordinary for mankind. Sometimes one small step is getting yourself vaccinated twice. Getting yourself tested every other day. Getting on a plane. Traveling in an airport in a world that you do not understand. Making all this effort to meet your great niece and your great nephew. And then he tells him, "You just call me Uncle Nicky. No stupid nicknames." The next morning, Kevin goes to check on his children. And he sees Nicky sleeping in a chair next to his kids. He quietly makes his way over to the bassinets. He notices the John Grisham books. He picks it up and smiles at his sleeping uncle. When he opens it, a picture falls out. The picture is the one that Sally took of the brothers all those years ago. A completely wordless scene and completely beautiful. Honestly, back in Justin Hartley's Smallville days, I don't think he could have carried a scene like this. But as Kevin has grown as a person, Justin Hartley has grown as an actor. Man, when this show is good, it is exceptionally good. I know there are a lot of people who didn't like this episode, but I am not one of them. I thought this episode was absolutely fantastic and beautiful. And it's the story I've been waiting for Uncle Nicky. And I hope he's sticking around for a while. Perhaps for good. But we shall see where the story goes. Anyway, that's all I got today for this video. If you like this video and my content in general and would like to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Korman Productions. You can join my two Facebook group pages, the Korman Productions page as well as the This Is Us discussion page. You can buy something from the Korman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a copy, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Korman Productions, signing off.